Hey folks, David Stewart here. Don't forget that New Pub Talk happens every single Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, so you can drop in the live chat and talk to me a little bit with whatever guest I happen to have for that week if I have a guest. Don't forget to visit my blog at dvspress.com. I'm going to have a lot more content for that coming in 2020. Now for this video, I'd like to look at the entire Mandalorian series so far, the entire first season, as one complete unit and do a by-the-numbers scored analysis of it. There's a couple reasons why I want to do that. First of all, I haven't done a scored analysis for each of the individual episodes as they've come out. The other reason is I think a lot of people were expecting this show to occupy the large arc format that has been popular on newer TV, where each episode is moving you one step closer to some goal, some overall story. And I think to a large extent, this series actually did that. There's a couple of episodes in the middle that are completely self-contained, like a more traditional series like Star Trek. But at the same time, those actually do, I think, contribute to the entire arc. As I hope I will be able to demonstrate, this series actually is in the format of a 3-act structure, very similar to a 2-hour movie, almost as if, and I think I've heard rumors of this, there was a 2-hour screenplay and they adapted it into a series by adding more things into it to kind of extend the story into an entire TV series. So with that in mind, I think it'd be a good idea to just do a by-the-numbers analysis. Now, keep in mind, this analysis, for comparison's sake, is going to be looking at the TV format, not the movie format. I don't think it would be fair to compare The Mandalorian to a high-production movie, but rather to other high to medium production TV shows. So let's jump into it and talk first about aesthetics. Aesthetics primarily deals with visual design in the show, and I give the aesthetics of this show a 7 out of 10. Now, they're very well executed, however, they aren't original. They are essentially just a copy-paste of what we saw with the original trilogy. We have stormtroopers, we even have an AT-ST walker, and we have the Empire aesthetics, we have a little bit of the Rebels aesthetics, and of course we have this central figure of the Mandalorian that is very much based on the iconic visual appeal of Boba Fett and Jango Fett from the movies, with a couple of differences. So because the aesthetics are mostly just transcribed, I don't think that they deserve a higher score, though they're well done. There are some things that I haven't seen too much of before. There's kind of the space orcs in one of the episodes, which I think is a race that exists in other formats as well, but it was interesting to see them on screen. And, a couple little things here and there. But the things that are new aren't necessarily all that well done. Like I mentioned the huts that were made out of baskets, like they forgot to put the daub on the wattle. All that was left was the wattle. Interesting little things like that. But overall, it was fairly well done. 7 out of 10 is an average grade for me. That's a C. Keep in mind, I do, regular grades like if you're in school. That makes a lot of sense to me because and I'll do this a separate video, if you start doing really low scores for things, that means that it's not functioning on that level at all. It's not present. A 1 out of 10 on aesthetics would be there's no visual presentation. Let's move on though. Cinematography and effects, I give those an 8 out of 10. And again, this is compared to other TV shows. They're generally very good. The effects are generally quite good. And some of the action scenes are really dynamite. They are excellent for the TV format. Some of the best I've seen. At the same time, a lot of the cinematography is very, I don't know how to put it. There's some shaky cam stuff that I'm not a big fan of, and there's also a lot of really slow shots. So the pacing of the entire show seems a little bit slow until we get towards the end of the series. So the first 3 episodes in particular are painfully slow. We have a lot of shots of just the Mandalorian kind of walking stiffly through towns. We didn't need a lot of those shots. They're not really establishing shots. They just kind of take up screen time without really giving anything to the story. So that's a little bit lower. But overall, the effects are really well done for TV. So I'll give them an 8 out of 10. And generally, it's pretty sharp visually for the format. Music is the last thing I will evaluate. I'm going to skip sound design. And the reason I'm skipping sound design is I don't think it's a significant contributor to the effect of the TV show. This is a home format, so the sounds are not as dialed in as you would get with an actual Star Wars movie. And they are not as much of a present force in the show as well, because the show tends to be more based around dialogue and character interaction, as is typical in television, rather than big, large-scale action scenes, which would be more typical for a big budget, big concept movie. So I'm skipping that because I don't think that should affect the score. Music, though, does affect the score, and I give the music a 6 out of 10. Now, if you had just asked me on the first 2 or 3 episodes, I would have said the music's like a 4 out of 10, but it does get significantly better as the series progresses to the point where it starts to have its own voice, rather than being kind of a set of sound effect, electronic, dissonant score kind of things in the first couple episodes. You start to have actual development of that opening theme that you get with the opening credits, and you start to get some actual orchestral sounds mixed in with it, and it just generally improves significantly by the time you get to episodes 7 and 8. It's still fairly sparse. It's still not really a Star Wars score to me, but it does become passable and effective towards the end of the series, and there are some memorable themes. You guys could probably hear you can probably hear some of the themes in your head. So that's a plus. The main reason it doesn't get higher than 6, though, is because of the low quality of the first couple of episodes. Let's move on to story. So the entire production, 7 out of 10. That's an average score. Let's move on to story. So the story has some positives, and it has some big negatives. So let's start with the setting. The setting I give a 6.5 out of 10. Why not an 8 out of 10? This is the part of the story that I think a lot of fans will actually really like hardcore Star Wars fans, but I found some significant problems with the setting, the way that the setting was executed. So the first one was this tracking fob that they introduced. This is a bit of a story algebra plot solution. Like, how do we go and track down these people? How can we make this convenient and fast? How can we make the Mandalorian be in real danger of bounty hunters later on? They came up with this tracking fob. There's no explanation of how it works. It is something that is intrusive on the setting, I think, and it's something that is a very disturbing thought. It's like, can they just track anyone, anywhere, anytime? How does it work? It's never really explained, and its usage, if we were to apply it to the larger setting outside of the series, would be a very odd thing to try to square. A weird square to try to circle, if you will, is to have that. So that tracking fob thing that really drives the first half of the series, I would say, becomes a real problem. It's a big negative. Then otherwise what we have is a little bit of exposition of the way that the setting as a whole works after Return of the Jedi. We have like an Imperial remnant. They're kind of underground when we meet them, and then we meet some more bad guys at the end that don't seem to be quite as underground. We still don't have a great idea of how the world works, despite the length of time that we've spent in the world. We're still kind of unsure of where the Republic fits in with this stuff. We have some references to the Republic. They attack a Republic prison ship manned by droids. It all seems a little bit disconnected with Star Wars as a whole. But the main thing is that some of the story algebra introductions just are weird. There's also this. The Mandalorians have the potential to be very interesting, but I found them to be very boring. I just didn't find them very interesting. This weird cabal of underground people that live by some sort of weird Bushido code that we never really have fully articulated. We have it kind of indirectly exposed to us. I just didn't find it very convincing or interesting. What I was kind of thinking of were Mandalorians of yore that I've experienced in other formats, which are just very different from how these Mandalorians end up being. So it's okay. The setting is definitely, it's a little bit above, it's passable. It's above passing grade for sure, but I don't think it quite gets into like the high quality territory of how you're going to expose the setting for the sake of the story. Likewise, we have a lot of unanswered questions. We don't really know that much about how Baby Yoda is supposed to work. We have some questions as to how the Force is supposed to work. We have a little bit of Force healing stuff. We have babies levitating woolly rhinos. We also have like Jawas on other planets, not being native to Tatooine, I guess, but with the exact same equipment that we have from the original trilogy. Again, that copy of the aesthetics. It's very odd, some of the things that they chose to do with setting, and because they didn't really flesh them out as much as we would need to kind of square that circle or circle that square, I got to give the setting a little bit lower score. Now, characters I give a 6.5 out of 10 as well. And there's some important reasons for this. The Mandalorian's not a terrible character, but because he has that mask on, there's very little human connection. The voice acting that's going through that mask is not very effective overall. It's a very subdued performance. There's not much emotion. We don't have a lot of exposition about how he feels about things. We get some flashbacks to how he got to be with the Mandalorians, and the tragedy that happened to his parents and things like that, but we don't really get a lot of emotion from him. And when we finally take his mask off, it's not like a very impactful reveal either. We have Baby Yoda, who doesn't talk. Now, Baby Yoda is very cute, but Baby Yoda to me doesn't really factor into a high character score. That's just like a cute thing for people to like in a show. We have Carl Weathers' character, whose name I don't remember off the top of my head, and we have Mara Dune. Those are the two that are left that are actually interesting, as well as the droid, the assassination droid, and Quill. So Quill is very kind of subdued as well. He's very stoic. And he's not a dislikable character, but he's not a character that I end up feeling like has a lot of depth. He feels very static. The droid becomes more interesting. Cara Dune and Carl Weathers are the ones that end up having any kind of dimensionality to them, and we just don't see very much of them. But it's okay. It's passable. So the characters are passable, 6.5 out of 10. I would have liked to see more revelation about the Mandalorian, who he is, whether he has a personality at all. He just doesn't have much of a personality in the show. Lastly, plot, 7 out of 10. Now, you could go higher or lower on this depending on how you view these middle episodes. So this is where I really want to talk about that 3-act structure again. If you look, it's very easy to break down the series into 3 parts. So the first part is the first 3 episodes. That is setting up the main conflict, which is we have a Baby Yoda, and the Empire wants the Baby Yoda, and then the decision at the end of the 3rd act where the hero has to decide to do something. That comes when he decides to save the Baby Yoda and basically go into hiding with the Baby Yoda rather than let the Empire do whatever kind of bad things they're going to do to him. And those middle 3 episodes, even though they're completely episodic, it's just like 3 individual stories, and I like that. They actually serve as what I call the chaos act, the act where the hero's on his heels, he doesn't know what he's doing, in the middle of a larger 3-act structure. So they actually fulfill that role really, really well. He goes on 3 different adventures, has 3 dangerous things happen, and is also aware, it's really to reinforce the fact that the decision from the 1st act is still impacting him. The bounty hunters are still coming after him. I can't leave this baby with these people. I have to solve the problem of people coming to try to get this baby. They're not going to stop. So then that sets up the 3rd act, which is episode 7 and 8, where he goes back to the original planet and has to come up with a plan to kill the Imperials that are trying to get Baby Yoda, to put a stop to their plan. And of course, that plan doesn't work, which is often part of the third act of a movie. The plan for the hero fails, and he has to think of something different. So it fails when up shows this Imperial warlord who blows up his original contacts with the Empire and really shows up with a strong force to kill him, and he has to think his way out of it and escape through some tunnels. It's a very good sequence, actually. So I think that final episode was one of the best of the series. I think it did a really good job, and those last 2 episodes really made a very impactful 3rd act. So that's why I think it ends up being a good overall plot. Now, the thing is that the reason it's not higher than 7 out of 10, despite the good execution of the 3rd act, is that the 1st act is very slow. It's painfully slow to get through the exposition of the 1st act at times. There are some great action scenes in there, but there's a lot of just nothing happening. We do have episode 2, which really is just a stop on the way of the hero making his decision. It really does act as filler. A little bit more time with Quill so that his death has an impact in Act 3. There's obviously spoilers in this review. A little bit more of an investment in Quill and the baby, and that's okay, but it does feel like an arrest of the forward momentum of the 1st act, and the 3rd episode takes a little bit long to do its things as well. So generally, it's too slow paced on the first 3 episodes. This probably could have been 2, If you cut it down to 2 and had basically the same events happen, I think you'd be a little better off, cut some of that stiff walking out. Then the middle 3 episodes, again, they're okay, but they are a little bit divorced from the overall plot, and some of the plots within them also feel a little rushed and a little bit, a little bit not enough of them. So we have this prison ship. That episode, to me, it's okay, but it really feels very off as far as pacing and very divorced from the tension that's supposed to be driving the story. So that one knocks it down a little bit. So it's 7 out of 10, which is an average score. So the story's pretty average for the plot. I knew where things were going to go for the most part. What I didn't really see was who was going to be the solution to the plan problem in the third act. It turned out to be the droid. Most of you correctly predicted that, whereas I thought it would specifically be Cara Dune, the female warrior. She was there and certainly was part of the solution, but she didn't provide the ultimate solution. It was the droid who did it. And they actually did a pretty good job overall at the plot of setting up. He has this aversion to droids. We finally get a reveal of why he has this aversion to droids. And then we have a droid that he ends up liking, and that droid has to sacrifice himself. So we have a good little emotional arc there. In general, it's pretty well done. One more thing I will say about the setting. So people said, hey, they're basically, it's just like a ripoff of Boba Fett. Yeah, to a certain extent. Before I get into general effect here, actually, this is actually part of general effect. So let me transition to talk about general effect. Give it a 7 out of 10. A lot of people have said that this is a kind of a ripoff of Boba Fett, that it's just kind of shamelessly making a series about Boba Fett with not Boba Fett. But here's why I don't think they did this series with Boba Fett specifically. They could have. There's nothing to say they couldn't have done that. But Boba Fett is not a good character. Boba Fett works for the Empire throughout most of the trilogy. He's working for Darth Vader, or he's working for like Jabba the Hutt. He's a bad guy. Whereas the Mandalorian is unambiguously a good character. He's a good character all the way through the entire series. He never kills anyone that really doesn't deserve it. He never kills in cold blood. He never acts badly. He's a very moral character. Even, at the beginning of the first episode with that kind of annoying blue character, he freezes him rather than killing him. So when he says, I can take you in hot or I can take you in cold, he doesn't really mean I'm going to bring in your lifeless body. He means I'm going to freeze you. So he's an unambiguously good character. That was clear to me right from the get-go, and they really hammered that home with the plot. The plot is about the Mandalorian making a good moral decision, and he starts in a more neutral position and moves to good. So he starts as kind of a rogue. He's a bounty hunter, moves into unambiguously moral, and he's supported by his code of ethics and his social group called the Mandalorians, who also have a code of honor. They have a Bushido to them. So the Bushido is part of that. And this is why, it's a little bit at odds with the Boba Fett character. The Boba Fett character doesn't really act with, at least in the movies, some special set of Bushido, some guiding principles. And that's really what they wanted this character to do. And they did an okay job with it. So I give the general effects 7 out of 10. Overall, I think the series kind of won me out towards the end. So it would be a higher score for the later episodes and a lower score for the early episodes. I think maybe it just had to find its feet with a couple of episodes and really figure things out before it hit its stride. But it definitely, by the time we got to episode 7 and 8, it was really hammering the story well. And those episodes of development in the middle, I think, really helped the series to feel like it had its own life to it as well. So it definitely ended up winning me out towards the end. So 7 out of 10, that's average. That makes the entire score for the entire thing 7 out of 10, which is an average score. Really, it's just like a 6.8 or something, but I just round up to 7, and that's pretty much bang on. So your score might be higher or lower, so I encourage you in the comments, tell me what you really liked about the series, or maybe something that really stopped you from liking the series. Everybody's going to have a different view of this. It's easy for me to see why fans really love The Mandalorian. It's because it has those classic Star Wars aesthetics, and more than that, it really tends to try to show you the underpinning philosophies of the universe. And I don't think it does that very well. I think it could definitely have been done better, but it's there rather than what you have with the Disney trilogy. And especially if we're contrasting it to, say, the Disney trilogy, it would be like a 9 out of 10. in comparison to that, as far as how the story feels. And the reason I think people like that is because the Disney trilogy just doesn't get Star Wars, and this series really feels like Star Wars. It feels like it's made by Star Wars fans. It is kind of fan fiction-y at times. There's a fan fiction-iest episode, right? But that's not necessarily a bad thing if the fans really like it. The people making it are like, man, I really like Star Wars, because then that appreciation for the universe shows in the way they treat it. So even that fan fiction-y episode didn't come off as bad. It just came off as trying a little too hard to be back in Tatooine. And that's all. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Leave me your thoughts down below in the comment section. Overall, it was a good effort, I think, and I think they'll actually improve it with season 2 now that they kind of have their feet on the ground, and I think they've set up a lot of things with that last episode. It could be very interesting. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Last thing, let me plug some books. So if you like sci-fi, this one's very popular, Voices of the Void. This is sci-fi horror. It came out last year, but check it out. It's 99 cents on Amazon, and I don't know where my newest book is, Eyes in the Wall. You can also get Crown of Sight. That's another quick read. You can read this in 2 hours instead of watching a movie, so that's pretty good. And make sure you sign up to my mailing list, dvspress.com/list, and you will get a free book. See you next time.